have to create conversation. You have to get, as a couple people have said, comfortable being uncomfortable.
Welcome, everyone, to the Driving Vision podcast brought to you by the Zeigler Auto Group. And here with me, Auto Group Director of Talent Development, Mike Van Ryn. Welcome, Mike.
Hey, thanks, Sam.
Be sure to subscribe to the podcast, like it if you do, and leave a comment. Hey, Team Zeigler. Welcome to this special edition of the Zeigler podcast, both for internal and external. We're going to actually push this out into the world, give everybody an opportunity to see what on earth we're up to here at the Zeigler Auto Group. So to provide some context around today and what we're doing, first want to acknowledge with us VP of Training and Development, Mike Van Ryn. Mike, welcome.
Well, thank you, Sam. Excited to be here.
And as always, Araya Daniels, Head of Training and Development. Araya, welcome.
Thanks, Sam.
So we're here to talk a backstage conversation. So we just finished up yesterday at Orland Park BMW, a conversation with Jim Craig. And Mike Van Ryn, would you tell us who Jim Craig is to Team Zeigler?
Well, for those hockey fans out there, Jim is the inspiration behind Miracle on Ice, the 1980 hockey team that achieved gold.
Yes. And Jim Craig is much beloved within Team Zeigler because he works with us on a regular basis. Many times a year, he'll come out. We do phone calls and we do live in Zeigler sessions where he challenges us to think outside the box, to create a ripple in the pond. And our conversation today is for that purpose. So Araya, will you start us out by telling everyone what the theme was and kind of what we talked about and who led the session yesterday? And then I'd love to hear from that leader what it meant to him doing that, Araya.
Yeah, absolutely. So yesterday's topic of conversation was characteristics of a winning underdog. And our very own Mike Bihun, general manager of our Kenosha Subaru store, was able to help co-lead this for the first time. We had a co-leading situation with Naya Zuganelis, who's really taken on a ton of different hats. I know in her role being finance manager, stepped into sales manager, so she's got her plate full, but both led and co-led that workshop yesterday, which was just a great time.
So several of us have co-led with Jim Craig. It's like skating on ice with an Olympic hockey champion, right? Like he asks super tough questions and he demands a lot. Mike Bihun, GM, Subaru Kenosha, what was it like working with Jim Craig to prep for this session?
I was super surprised at how much prep work there really was. It was close to 2 months. We had starting out with Jim, who set the stage and really started making you think differently. But working with Mike Van Ryn and with some of his staff was absolutely awesome because it kept us all organized, kept us on pace, and the prep work really paid off. And the timelines I had worked out perfect. So it was quite the experience.
So having gone through that, I have a question for you, Mike Bihun. Why on earth does an auto group have a general manager of a highly successful Subaru store in Kenosha, Wisconsin, take time out of their day for a couple months to prepare for a meeting, a session, a leadership development session with an Olympic gold hockey medalist? Why do we do that, Mike? What's the positive? Why do that?
Well, I think it's just making for myself being a general manager, making the leader better. I mean, the things that working with Jim and working with the other leaders in that class and getting feedback and collaboration, it's something I can take back and try to get my team better and hopefully continue that ripple as you talk about. So I think that's why Aaron invests not only his money, but his own time. Aaron was, in there as well. So he believes in it, and, it's an opportunity for, individuals to get better at their craft.
Yeah, it is pretty cool that we do this, I think, and give ourselves an opportunity to exert leadership in a different way than retailing every day. Well, let's do this. Let's introduce our panel today. So we've got several members of Team Zeigler from stores across our 4-state area. So let's go through and introduce everybody, and then we'll actually start with Lindsay Latsko and ask her what her big takeaway was. But introducing our panel today. So Ryan Post, part of our executive team, newest member of the executive team. Ryan, welcome.
Thank you, Sam. Excited to be here.
Scott Eubank, GSM from Fort Wayne Subaru, talking of Subaru stores in one of our newest stores, Fort Wayne, Indiana. Scott, welcome.
Thank you, sir. Glad to be here.
And Sean Summers from one of our largest Subaru stores, newest acquisitions in Lafayette, Indiana, right next to the Subaru of America plant. I guess this is a Subaru show today, Sean. Welcome.
Thank you for having me, Sam.
And then the odd woman out in this whole deal is Lindsay Latsko, not affiliated yet with the Well, I guess you work with
kind of.
So we're excited to have you back, Lindsay. You've been here many times.
Yes, happy to be here.
So, Lindsay, tell us, what was one of your big takeaways from this session talking about the winning underdog?
Yeah, well, I loved the theme of winning underdogs. I think all of us can relate to that in personal, business, across the board. So I think my biggest takeaway was yesterday when I was reflecting on the day at home later, I thought, identifying who on my team and that I work with are underdogs, whether they're, we talked about just being an underdog and then a winning underdog, and that difference, right? Having that determination, that drive, that passion to, go through any hurdle that you're faced and come out on top. So for me, it really, I really took time last night to reflect and see who on my team and that I work with is in that position. And then something else that we talked about too is identifying those people. And then, are they in the right position? Maybe they are a winning underdog, but, they're in a role that they're not able to fully, use all their skill set in. And is there a different role that they would be better in? So I think that was really my biggest takeaway, was just making sure that the people that I work with and are on my team have that mindset of a winning underdog. And can we develop them more? Or is there a position that maybe is better suited for them?
Lindsay, I agree. I think that's fascinating. I'd love to have Araya define what an underdog is for us in just a moment. But before we do that, Lindsay, I think it's fascinating that as employees, we come to work and we give a part of our life, part of ourself to this job. And Jim pointed out, and you are pointing out, that sometimes we might be in a position that we kind of got promoted up to, and it might not be a great match, or maybe we just landed into because it was kind of a natural path, but it may not best suit or serve our skills. And a great leader can help see that, can help point that out, and maybe help chart a path that better serves unique, personality traits or areas of interest, right, Lindsay? Like, I hadn't thought of that before, but I think about members of teams I've seen who are relieved to be able to show on a different path than where they are currently. Have you run into that, Lindsay?
I have actually. I've had a member on my team who, I don't want to name names, but I felt maybe wasn't in a right position. And this was in the past, but wasn't in a right position and found a better position for them. And they were able to succeed and really fulfill their skill set and feel better about themselves coming to work and being, successful. So definitely.
How do you deal with that? If you see someone and they're in a role and it's like, it's just not your role. Like, do you have advice?
I think it's just calling it out. I think it's just, bringing that person in and it's not like, hey, you're failing, but making sure that they, finding out what they feel.
Yeah.
Well, actually, let me go back. What I asked this specific person to do was write out all their job responsibilities. Said, write out exactly what you do on a daily basis and what you think you're supposed to be doing. And then I really just asked them, like, are you happy with these, tasks and job responsibilities? And was able to pull out that, they were doing some things that, one, they didn't have the skill set for, and two, that really just didn't fulfill them and they didn't have the passion for. And I had another opportunity come about and I was able to move them into a different role that they could really succeed in. And I think it's just identifying it. And we talked about yesterday too, which is, identifying those issues and making changes quickly. And I know Aaron says, like, fail fast, right?
Yes.
And so just, identifying it head on and making sure everybody's on the same page and making that move as quick as you can identify it.
Jim talks a lot about the word courage in leadership. And sometimes it takes courage to identify someone that might need to be in a better or different or position that suits themselves better. And to your point, like, speaking truth sometimes can be hard. Why is it so difficult sometimes to speak truth, even though on the other side of that adversity is a better employee and a better, more fulfilled team, right? Why is that sometimes a challenge, Lindsay?
Well, because you don't want to hurt somebody's feelings, and it can be uncomfortable too, right? It's super awkward. It's not a fun conversation to have, and you don't want that person to feel like they've, fallen on their face or they haven't done a great job, or, so it's really uncomfortable. But again, that was another thing we talked about, was being comfortable with being uncomfortable. So
yeah, so let's have Araya define winning underdog for us. And after that, Scott, if you would share, you've had you're building a brand new team in Fort Wayne. Your team joined Team Zeigler 6-9 months ago, and you've had to make some adjustments and shift people around, and you've had to have courage in some tough conversations. Maybe give us some tips on that. Or Araya, how would you define winning underdog?
Yeah. So, when we discussed this and we defined the traits inside of this workshop yesterday, which was pretty cool. We all got on a whiteboard and everyone listed out traits and characteristics of what they think a winning underdog is and what that looks like. But ultimately, it came down and boiled down to your mindset. And so the mindset of, am I going to choose to be the victim or am I going to choose to be the victor? And I think it's really cool to look at that and just think like, that's a daily choice. And that was something that Jim really hit on, is that every day you get to decide whether you're going to be the underdog or you're going to be the winning underdog. And that's just such a mindset. We all wake up on different days and maybe you have bad days or whatever, but you get to define what that looks like for yourself. And I'm such a big believer in that it's a mindset, no matter what you face, whatever trials you go through, whatever your past looks like and the choices you've made, anything that you do now and moving forward is a choice. And that's what makes you a winning underdog, is when you can come out on top and get rid of that self-doubt in yourself and make the mindset shift to know that you are going to win. That's winning underdog.
We can use that as fuel to feed our fire and drive our internal engine to achieve great things too, right, Araya?
Yeah, absolutely.
That mindset was a pivotal moment yesterday. I was sitting in the back of the room, Mike, with you when Jim said, it's mindset. The mindset word is missing on this page. And I love how you put that, Araya, because, it reminds me of Tony Robbins. He often talks about, as things happen around us, we get to decide the meaning of things. And oftentimes it's all about the questions. Some people will say, why me? Why do I always end up in this situation? And a better question sometimes can be is how do I benefit the world? How do I create a better world? How do I give back? How do I turn this into a positive, right? Asking really good questions that help impact our mindset. That is super powerful. So Scott, as you've built a new team, and then we'll go to Sean with the same question because he's done the same thing in Lafayette. What are some difficult things you've had to do to help support your team in becoming winning underdogs?
Well, to Lindsay's point, some of these conversations are just very uncomfortable to have in the first place. And there's some accountability that you have to have, not just for us, but for everyone involved in the team. And we have to make sure we're rowing in the right direction. If we're not all rowing in the same direction, why aren't we? And what's going on there? And, recently it was tough, but we had to take somebody and make the decision that we want them on the team, but they're in a position that we don't think that they're ready for, and that we hope that they stay on the team and we need to move them into a different place, which we did. And so far, you could almost see a weight lifted off of that particular person's shoulders. I mean, they've had a great attitude. They've been happy, and almost like
they're
the stress
part of the team too, right, Scott? Like, it wasn't a matter of you're not on the bus anymore. You're just in a better role that suits and serves you better, right?
Exactly. Yeah. That initial conversation that, they weren't sure if it was going to be for them, or, it's not that they didn't understand. They just were kind of disappointed. Maybe there's a little bit of failing that was involved in that on their part. But yeah, they're still here and they have a great attitude and they're joking around and they're working hard. And it was great to be able to see that transition, because that it was probably the right thing for them as well, even if they didn't see it at the time.
It's interesting when you say that. One of the things that makes that type of a change tough, where we become winning underdogs, is in that shift. Sometimes our ego can become hurt. And talk to us about the role of a leader, Mike or Araya, and then we'll go to Mike Bihun before we go back to Sean. We're all over in this. Talk to us about the role of a leader in managing that ego in that transition to the right role. Jim talked about ego being swagger, conflict being change. We can be afraid of having courage in the moment because it's a difficult conversation, and we got to manage their ego so that they retain that swagger through the transition and they still know they're an important part of the team, Mike Van Ryn, right?
Yeah, that's a great question, Sam. And I think great leaders are able to make shifts and make adjustments as they lead their teams. And great leaders at times are able to have that ego, that confidence, that swagger. And then also they know times when they can shift and make an adjustment where they have to be just totally empathetic and caring and really connect with their team, right? So to be able to make that shift is a talent. It's a talent that leaders have.
Yeah. What do you think of that, Mike Bihun? That was a pivotal moment in the convo yesterday.
Yeah, there was a lot of pivotal moments in that yesterday. You know, the one I was focusing on was in that last video where they were talking about how passion sometimes outdefies logic.
Oh yeah.
And they were talking, and you know, that was a super powerful statement in that to me, that all the analytics and all the measurements and all the numbers are saying one thing against how an individual is, you know, those profile tests that everyone has to take for these, not everyone, but, you know, people take the old DISC profile things. And all of a sudden there's an individual that has more passion and more heart and more drive than the person that on paper looks good. I mean, that's the best. And identifying who has that and who doesn't might not be the easiest thing, but over time you start. We made a thing yesterday. One gentleman talked about, you know, waiting 90 days to get something, but in your gut, they talked about, you know, if someone has it or doesn't have it normally in the first couple, 2-3 weeks. So
yeah,
you know, it goes back to the old adages, you know, hire slower and fire faster.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, he was talking about that, you know, that gut, but that was a big moment in the thing for me.
Sean, how have you managed change in your team at Subaru Lafayette? Brand new store in the last 6 to 9 months. And you've had a lot of change there that you've had to manage through and lead through.
Yeah, we've had, you know, pretty much everything kind of just flipped on its head from what we were used to having. But, you know, we've done a good job about, you know, like they said in the session yesterday, just making sure everybody has the right mindset and we're all looking to achieve the same goals every day. You know, we focus on putting our egos aside and just knowing that the sum of the whole is greater than just one person. So, you know, as long as we know what we're trying to achieve, you know, it's pretty easy, as long as, you know pretty quickly if somebody is actually committed or if they're, you know, kind of half in, half out. So it's just reacting to those kinds of situations quickly and making sure you have the right person there.
So before we come to you, Ryan, for your big takeaway from yesterday, notice I'm prepping everybody before we go in, so you're not completely unaware. But there was a moment yesterday. There were a couple things. Jim talked about triggers. Would someone want to kind of take that on? I love this concept of triggers and share with us. Who wants to hit triggers?
I can talk about triggers.
I can talk about that as well.
Go ahead.
All right. And Araya, if you would you lean towards Mike gently? Because Mike's side is good for some reason and you're a little fainter. Okay.
Yeah. Sean, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Go ahead.
So Jim brought it up when I stood up and, you know, I buttoned up my jacket. I didn't even really think about that up until that point. And then he started talking about triggers. And later on, you know, just you could see I'm not sure what's happening. My mic keeps muting on me. You could see just triggers when people get into the zone of what they're trying to accomplish. You know, when it was her putting his glasses on, or, you know, just any little things that you see people do, that just putting the helmet on, you know, as Aaron talked about with the drivers, you know, just, you know, it was really interesting to hear that because I never really put 2 and 2 together.
Oh, what's your trigger, Sean?
Well, I guess it's when I buttoned up my jacket. I didn't really even think about that, but it was like once I did that, took the breath, I was ready to go.
I thought it was fascinating how Aaron told the story about the golfer. His trigger was putting on his glove. Carson Hocevar, who by the time this is aired will have raced Talladega, hopefully to a top 10 finish again. It's putting on the helmet where he's totally game on. Araya, what's your trigger?
Easy, working out.
That's awesome.
Trigger is working out because I wake up in the morning and that's my way to get my head in the game, to decide that I'm going to go do something really hard to show myself that I can be really great.
Why is it useful to know what your trigger is, Mike Van Ryn?
Well, it's back to what we talked about earlier, mindset. It gets you in the zone and the mindset for what you need to accomplish and what you need to do. So triggers are very important.
Lindsay's.
I don't know, actually. I guess I have to identify mine. I'm not sure. I mean, I think for the day, it's my drive to work. I have a longer commute. So I think by that, like, I drink my coffee, and the last 15 minutes, I'm really thinking about like what I'm going to accomplish for the day. And I do a lot of talk to text notes while I'm driving. That's good or bad, but
Yeah, I don't know what my trigger is. I need to figure out. Anybody know what my trigger is? Anybody?
podcasts. No.
Podcasting? Yeah. Game on.
Asking great questions, Sam.
Yeah.
There you go. It's 5-hour energy shots early in the morning, maybe before my workout. I don't know. So Ryan, what's your trigger? And then what's your big takeaway?
Man, I don't know what my trigger is. I mean, the first thing I do in the morning is I always have a notepad next to my bed that I write down the night before of the 5 things I need to accomplish for the day. So
that's good.
Yeah, I think that gets my mind going. I'm a checklist guy. Like I have a couple different themes that I've lived by. One of them's called.
I like that.
Yeah, I've done a video on this before. Is mine's getting bulletproof by noon. Like I have to have all my busy work done by noon so I can start acting on the rest of the day. But having the checklist is big for me. It gets my mind going as soon as I wake up in the morning. And yeah, what I take away from yesterday, I mean, everything was good. Winning Underdog is a great theme. But what I got from it the most that Mike and I did a great job with, and Jim kind of hit home, was, how are you developing your people, your teammates? How are we building leaderships in this company? And are we growing our people towards a positive future that's only going to help the organization? Like when Aaron brought me aboard, there were a lot of different questions coming from overseeing stores, but the biggest thing he kept on saying to me, he goes, you're here to add value. You need to go and add value, whether it's at individual stores, individual people, or other leaders in the company. You need to add value. And I think that's kind of been the way I look at every day. How can I add value to a store, to a leader, to a person, to a process? And, Jim hits it home with, how we have to develop people constantly, how we have to grow people. And, how do we utilize all the information we got from yesterday? Like, are people bringing their notebook back with the stuff they wrote down, and did they put it in their top shelf today? Or did they try to use some of that information with a person that's on the Zeigler team somewhere?
And Araya, you stood up at the very end of class and said it very eloquently, right? The difference between success and failure in this is what we do as we walk away, Ryan. You said it well. Araya, anything you want to add to that idea as you train and develop and have culture conversations across the ZAG in these coming months?
Yeah, we have a lot going on right now with those culture conversations, which is another topic. But Mike and I are sitting in our Zeigler Motorsports locker room and did an aspiring leaders course today. So we finished it out, graduated a group of 22 people over 5 classes. And we told them the same thing we ended that conversation on yesterday, is that now the work has just begun. Like everything that you've just learned, and the resources that we talked about and the questions that can draw a conversation and drive that development for each other and our teams is only just begun. You got to take it back and you've got to execute on it in order to keep that conversation going. So I think that was big takeaway towards the end, is just reminding, like, here's all the tools we talked about. Now go take it back.
Mike, Bihun, what's your trigger?
For me, this started a long time ago. Someone told me I couldn't do something.
I love that. Yeah.
When I first got in the business, my first year selling cars, I think I made 18 grand. And everybody was like, what are you doing? Then I had a daughter, and, then everybody was telling me to get out of the business. And I just fired. It's been like that my whole life. Just don't tell me I can't do something. And I've used that fire for now. It's been going on 32 years in the car business. So that's definitely my trigger.
That's what I did, Sam. That's what I did when I first called Mike Bihun and said, hey, I don't think you can lead a Jim Craig workshop. You just couldn't.
That's pretty much what it was.
Before we wrap, one last topic. So one thing that exists everywhere in the car business and everywhere in life, period, and I always love how Jim addresses this topic, is conflict. It's tension. It's difficult situations. Like if you watch any good old movie, whether it's Used Cars or Suckers or what's it called, The Edge or The Goods, like the car business is just ripe with conflict through and through. Jim has a different way of dealing with that conflict, and Team Zeigler personifies it. I think we've done a great job over our time addressing it. Anybody want to talk about conflict and its role in team building and how we address it and deal with it?
We encourage conflict.
We do encourage it. Why?
Because it pushes us. It makes us, again, identify what our issues are, and it helps us be better.
Yeah, but
there's always something to learn.
But Lindsay, conflict hurts people's feelings, and it's challenging.
No crying in the car business.
It hurts.
I think we talked about it quite a bit yesterday. It was about that pressure and what can come from that. And with a little bit of conflict, you get a little bit more pressure. It's not just going to a classroom or a workshop and somebody saying, hey, this would be a good idea. This would be a good idea, and see what you get out of it. This is a good idea, and this is why. And hey, you didn't listen. And hey, we, step up to the plate a little bit better because we've talked about these things. You're not doing them right now. That was my takeaway from, the conflict that he introduces into these workshops. I got so much more out of it than I feel like I have in a lot of other ones I've been to throughout my tenure. So
I agree with you. And there's nothing worse than when you're sitting in a meeting trying to accomplish something and there's just a bunch of nodding heads to everything. Like, you have to create conversation. You have to get, as a couple people have said, comfortable being uncomfortable, and friends fight, right? And it's not a bad fight, but to find a solution, you have to get past some of the conflict, and it's healthy. It's good. There's nothing worse than sitting in the meeting where everyone's just agreeing with you. You want to have some difference of opinions, and you want to be able to solve problems from that conflict.
Yeah. Again, I wrote down on the piece of paper, ego equals swagger. Absolutely. Conflict equals change, and conflict arises as change happens. Jim said, maybe somebody could address this. A coach can't manage a player, a high ego player. A customer can't necessarily change a high ego player, but a locker room can. The team can. What's that about?
I think it's just about being in the right place and having the empathy. And like when you're addressing situations, you're having that conflict to address wanting to change, like you're helping hold people accountable, and you're doing it in a way that's kind and for the betterment of that person to become better, instead of being egotistical or, I'm better than you, or that you're wrong, right? Like that conflict that we want to create in the locker room is all for the betterment of making someone just better than they were yesterday.
And I also think, Sam, if I remember correctly, Jim also said your team members need to know they have permission to make things.
Yes.
So, how I look at it, if the team is all rowing in the same direction and has got the same focus, they're not going to allow one person to ruin that culture if they're having success. I think that's what he meant when he said that the coach can't do it, but the team will do it, because the team has already bought into the culture and will make sure it gets corrected.
That's powerful. That's powerful. All right. Appreciate everybody on this panel. Araya, you defined what an underdog is, I think, earlier. Jim said at the very end, we should all be underdogs. Why did he say that as we walk away, almost as a challenge to Team Zeigler within our culture? We're a large company. We rank very highly in the top 100 auto groups. Why would we want to try to be an underdog in continuing to deliver to our customers every day?
I think if anything, you just have to remember that you're not the best out there. Always be growing, always be thinking about what you can do to become innovative and change and become better, because let's face it, not everyone knows everything. There's always room for growth and room for improvement.
Yeah, it's like Tom Izzo said to us when he came out and spoke, Mike Van Ryn. You probably remember this. Tom Izzo said, as soon as you get good at something that you do, you've got to reinvent yourself. You've got to always be that underdog, because what worked today ends up looking like below minimal effort, a year down the road. And that's from one of the winningest NCAA men's basketball coaches of all time, right? Like, be an underdog, Mike Van Ryn. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's about relevancy. We all want to be relevant in what we do for our team.
Mike Bihun, everybody agree that Mike and Nia just did a spectacular job?
They killed it.
They crushed it.
Did a fantastic job.
Yeah, you
Yeah, it
guys
was
did a good job. Mike Bihun, what advice would you give to anyone else who ends up getting asked to do a future session, or maybe even someone on Team Zeigler that wants to do it in the future?
My number one thing is put in the work. Be prepared, because if you're not, it's gonna show real quick, especially in the room with Jimmy. You'll know if you're prepared or not on that side. But I would have anybody welcome the opportunity to do it. It's an honor to be able to present to 20 great leaders. That leadership team that was assembled yesterday was probably one of the best groups I've been around. There was a lot of different views, very diverse, a lot of energy. People were involved, so that made it the whole thing well worth it. But just an opportunity to spend some time with Jim and understand some thought process, and he brings some things out. As well prepared as I thought Nia and I were, he took it to another level as far as body movements and this and those type of things. So it was a learning experience for me, I really appreciate the effort that was put into it. So I would recommend it for anybody.
I would say too, just to add to that, is to not wait for permission, right? Raise your hand, put yourself out there and say, hey, I'm going to do this. I'll be prepared to do it. And because the only way that you're going to grow is to, I think, constantly put your neck out and see in the ways that you could challenge yourself to become better.
That's true. That is awesome. Well, Mike Bihun, Ryan Post, Mike Van Ryn, Orion Daniels, Sean Summers, Scott Eubank, Lindsay Latsko. We appreciate all of you for being on the show today. And my goodness, Team Zeigler, if you want to know more about what went on this week, reach out to any one of those participants or the others that attended. And if you want to join a future session, reach out to Mike Van Ryn or Orion Daniels for more information and get involved in developing your own leadership. And let's go make a difference in the world today by becoming and continuing to be great winning underdogs. Team Zeigler, thank you all. We appreciate you.
Thank you.
A big thanks to Mike Bihun, Ryan Post, Mike Van Ryn, Orion Daniels, Sean Summers, Scott Eubank, Lindsay Latsko for contributing to this week's podcast. Until next week, how are you driving vision today?